This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast. This week we honor the year in music for 2003 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2003. We also look at the case for putting Linkin Park into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Plus, our Spotlight Hall of Fame is the ARIA Hall of Fame in Melbourne, Australia. Before we get going with the podcast, like everyone tells you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when these podcast episodes drop, which is usually every Thursday. Now, on to this week's episode. This week we are going to take a look at a group who will be eligible for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the first time in 2025. This means that their first official release came out in 2000. Yep, feel old, people. Let's take a look at the Agora Hills, California band, Linkin Park. As always, to the tail of the tape we go. Linkin Park released 8 studio albums, 3 live albums, 2 compilation albums, 3 soundtrack albums, and 2 remix albums. Of those, 14 hit the top 40, with all but 2 of those hitting the top 10, including 6 going to number 1. They also released 10 EPs. Of those, the only one that really charted was the 2004 collaboration with Jay-Z known as Collision Course, which went all the way up to the top of the charts. Linkin Park also released 44 singles. Of those, 37 hit the top 40 on various American charts, including 22 of those 37 going top 10, and 12 of those going to number 1. They've sold 100 million albums and 30 million singles worldwide. Their 2000 debut album Hybrid Theory sold over 12 million copies in the United States alone. And they've sold 29.4 million albums in total in America so far. As far as why they should be inducted, well, they tapped into the fear and anger of a generation and turned it into art. They also helped to make nu metal, for better or worse, popular. Your opinion of nu metal may vary, but I actually kind of like it. And I love Linkin Park. The group is still pretty influential with new artists and fans, even after the tragic early death of lead singer Chester Bennington in 2017. They now have a new lead singer named Emily Armstrong, which of course, since she's female, has been met with the usual anti-feminist stuff that we all have to deal with in this day and age because, sure. Will they get on the first ballot? Probably not in 2025. I say probably because there are bands out there that you kind of wonder why they got on the ballot to begin with in this new day and age. So I suppose it could happen, but probably not. Will they somewhere down the road, maybe by the end of the decade? Maybe, especially since the more obvious choices will probably be in by that point. God willing, Iron Maiden, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, just mentioning a few. Listen to me, Hall. Put them in. Anyway, does Linkin Park deserve to get in? In my opinion, yeah. With hits like Numb, Crawling, One Step Closer, In the End, Points of Authority, Breaking the Habit, and a bunch of others, Linkin Park's songs helped to define the millennial generation, even if us Gen Xers don't actually want to admit that and look down on the millennials. I do not. I actually like their music. For me, Linkin Park deserves to be inducted eventually into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm just not quite sure that that's going to happen in their first year of eligibility. I could be wrong, though. Let me know what you think. I have put their biggest hits onto this week's podcast playlist, by the way. And of course, as we do every week, that link is in the show notes. Before we go any further, we'd like to tell you that there is now a Music History In-Depth podcast where we go more in depth on a few of the events that happened in music history for that particular week. The Music History In Depth podcast drops every Tuesday on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from, as does our Music History Today podcast, which goes over the daily events in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops daily, including weekends, on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, back to this podcast. The year was 2003. In music for that year, producer Phil Spector was arrested and later convicted for the death of actress Lana Clarkson. Michael Jackson was also arrested that year on child molestation charges. He would later be found not guilty, at least in a court of law. A fire in a nightclub in Rhode Island claimed 100 lives when pyrotechnics set off during a performance by the group Great White set the nightclub on fire, quickly spreading and then trapping people inside. The Dixie Chicks, now called the Chicks, created controversy when they came out against the Iraq War, which at the time had high public approval ratings. That would later change as the decade went on. The iTunes Store opened online on April 28th of that year, saving the music industry from itself. The Recording Industry Association of America started suing fans who downloaded music illegally. Singles didn't sell as much overseas, as 2003 was the first year that no singles sold over 1 million copies in the United Kingdom. Celine Dion started a trend when she started her residency shows in Las Vegas. Pop and rock stars doing month-long and multi-year concert runs in casinos in Vegas at the height of their careers would soon become the norm and no longer the exception. Groups who were formed in 2003 included the Cheetah Girls, Chloe and Haley, Gnarls Barkley, Equilibrium, Nina Sky, Ramses, and the Pussycat Dolls. Groups who either broke up or took their extended breaks until their inevitable reunions included BB Mac, Black Flag, Men Without Hats, Pantera, The Cranberries, Quiet Riot, Propeller Heads, Remy Zero, The Righteous Brothers, The Rollins Band, S Club 7, Gang Starr, Gravity Kills, Seville, Stone Temple Pilots, Suede, Winger, and Wild Orchid. As usual, a bunch of those groups got back together for at least a tour or two. Groups that officially got back together in 2003 included the Stooges and Edge of Sanity. 50 Cent had the biggest album of the year on the pop charts with Get Rich or Die Trying. Other big albums were Norah Jones's Come Away With Me, Michael Jackson's Number Ones, the Dixie Chicks' Home, Linkin Park's Meteora, Evanescence's Fallen, Beyoncé's debut solo album, Dangerously in Love, Christina Aguilera's Stripped, Britney Spears' In the Zone, Avril Lavigne's Let's Go, and Coldplay's A Rush of Blood to the Head. 50 Cent also scored the number one single of 2003 on the Hot 100 singles chart within the club. Other hit songs were R. Kelly's Ignition, Sean Paul's Get Busy, Beyonce and Jay-Z's Crazy in Love, Three Doors Down's When I'm Gone, Matchbox 20's Unwell, Chingy's Right There, Aaliyah's Miss You, Kid Rock and Sheryl Crow's Picture, and Evanescence's Bring Me to Life. In country music, Toby Keith, Brenda Lee, Joe D. Messina, Leanne Rimes, Trace Atkins, and Alan Jackson all had best-selling greatest hits albums. Other big country albums that were released included Buddy Jewell's self-titled album, Chris Cagle's self-titled album, Daryl Worley's Have You Forgotten, George Strait's Honky Tonkville, Martina McBride's Martina, Brad Paisley's Mud on the Tires, Brooks and Dunn's Red Dirt Road, and Winona's What the World Needs Now Is Love. Alan Jackson and Jimmy Buffett had the biggest hit of the year with It's 5 O'Clock Somewhere. Other big country singles included Mark Wills's 19-something, Blake Shelton's The Baby, Toby Keith and Willie Nelson's Beer for My Horses, Joe Nichols' Broken Heartsville, Diamond Rio's I Believe, Gary Allen's Man to Man, and also Tough Little Boys, Lone Star's My Front Porch Looking In, Tim McGraw's Real Good Man, Kenny Chesney's There Goes My Life, and Randy Travis's Three Wooden Crosses. In hip-hop, the biggest album was, of course, 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Tryin', but other big albums that were released included Outkast's Grammy Award-winning album, The Speaker Box of Love Below, along with Jay-Z's The Black Album, Tupac's Tupac Resurrection, Ludacris's Chicken and Beer, G-Unit's Beg for Mercy, DMX's Grand Champ, The Neptunes' The Neptune Presents Clones, Obi Trice's Cheers, and the Bad Boys 2 movie soundtrack. As far as singles went, of course, 50 Cent's In the Club was the biggest, but he also had competition from himself, specifically the songs 21 Questions, PMIP, and Wanksta. Other hits included Ludacris's Stand Up, Lil' Kim's Magic Stick, Chingy's Holiday Inn, One Call Away, and Right There, Nelly's Air Force One's, Jay-Z's Excuse Me Miss, Busta Rhymes and Mariah Carey's I Know What You Want, Fabulous's Can't Let You Go, and also Into You, Youngblood's Damn, Pharrell Williams' Frontin', and a song by legendary wrestler Randy Muscle Man Savage called Remember Me, which went to number 1. Go figure. In dance music, Music Magazine stopped publishing a hard copy magazine. Tiesto started the trend of DJs doing solo stadium and arena shows. On the dance charts, the pop and R&B crossover artists who had hits were a rather eclectic bunch that year. Among them were Madonna, Mariah Carey, Justin Timberlake, Seal, Pink, Michael Jackson, Daniel Bedingfield, Jewel, along with Elvis Presley and the Rolling Stones. Yes, you heard that right. DJ Paul Oakenfold did a remix of Elvis's song Rubberneckin', and there was a remix of the Stones classic Sympathy for the Devil that hit number 1. As far as the more legit quote-unquote dance artists other than DJ Paul Oakenfold, The Weekend Players, Freeland, Paul Van Dyke, Bob Sinclair, Darude, Boomcat, Christine W., Anastasia, Robbie Rivera, BT, The Funky Green Dogs, Laura Pausini, Chris Cox, Becky Bailing, and Deborah Cox all had big dance hits in 2003, but probably the longest lasting song of 2003 in terms of impact both on radio and in DJ and festival mixes to this very day is Benny Benazzi's classic electro house anthem, Satisfaction. The top 10 DJs on DJ Mag's Top 100 DJs poll for the year, by the way, were Tiesto, Paul Van Dyke, Armin van Buuren, Sasha, John Digweed, Ferry Corsten, Carl Cox, Paul Oakenfold, Judge Jules, and Deep Dish. In Latin music, Juanes was the biggest act of the year. Also having good years were Celia Cruz, Ricky Martin, Shakira, Cumbia Kings, Ricardo Arjona, and La India. Broadway musicals and revivals that opened in 2003 included Wicked, Avenue Q, Bells, 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 Bounce, Caroline or Change, The Full Monty, Jerry Springer, The Opera, Never Gonna Dance, Show Tune, Taboo, Thoroughly Modern Millie, The Boy from Oz, Fame on 42nd Street, and Tonight's the Night. Musical movies, concert films, and documentaries included Brother Bear, Camp, End of the Century, The Story of the Ramones, From Justin to Kelly, The Jungle Book 2, Love Under the Sun, A Mighty Wind, School of Rock, The Singing Detective, and Tupac Resurrection. Artists who were born in 2003 included Olivia Rodrigo, The Kid Laroi, Bad Barbie, Jojo Siwa, Tate McRae, and Blanco. Artists who unfortunately passed away in 2003 included country music superstar Johnny Cash, his wife June Carter Cash, Maurice Gibb of the Bee Gees, singer and songwriter Warren Zevon, Howie Epstein of Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, country music singer Johnny Paycheck, jazz songstress Nina Simone, R&B singer and songwriter Edwin Starr, Noel Redding of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, flute player Herbie Mann, entertainer extraordinaire Mr. Bob Hope, the founder of Sun Studios Sam Phillips, entertainer Gregory Hines, entertainer Donald O'Connor, the maestro of love himself Mr. Barry White, show you right, the queen of salsa herself Celia Cruz, country music singer Slim Dusty, singer Hank Ballard, singer Robert Palmer, singer-songwriter Elliott Smith, popular symphony conductor Michael Kamen, country music singer Don Gibson, singer Bobby Hatfield, and rappers Sabotage, Camouflage, Half a Mill, and Soulja Slim. In awards for the music of 2003, Outkast became the first hip-hop act to win the Grammy Award for Best Album for Speakerboxxx The Love Below. Coldplay won Record of the Year for Clocks. Luther Vandross and Richard Marx won Song of the Year for Dance with My Father, and Evanescence won Best New Artist, which had yet another one of those awkward moments when fellow New Artist nominee 50 Cent went up on stage when Evanescence won in order to complain, pulling a Kanye in the process. At the American Music Awards, Madonna won Artist of the Year. At the Billboard Music Awards, 50 Cent won Artist of the Year. At the MTV Video Music Awards, Madonna kissed Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, which was all anybody could talk about for the next freaking year. But aside from that, the Video of the Year actually went to Missy Elliott for Work It. Outkast won Album of the Year at the Soul Train Music Awards. Beyoncé and Faith Hill won the music categories at the People's Choice Awards. At the Eurovision Song Contest, which was held in Riga, Latvia, Sertab Erener from the country of Turkey won for the song Every Way That I Can. Alan Jackson won Entertainer of the Year at the Country Music Association Awards, and Toby Keith won Entertainer of the Year at the Academy of Country Music Awards. The Darkness won Best British Album for Permission to Land, and Dido won Best Song for White Flag at the Brit Awards. Sam Roberts won Best Album for We Were Born in a Flame, while Nelly Furtado won Best Song for Powerless, Say What You Want at the Juno Awards. Powderfinger won Album of the Year for Vulture Street, and Delta Goodrem won Song of the Year for Born to Try at the ARIA Music Awards. At the Tony Awards, Hairspray won Best Musical and Nine won Best Revival of a Musical. The Pulitzer Prize for Music was won by John Adams for On the Transmigration of Souls. Musically, at the Academy Awards, the movie The Return of the King won both music categories, with the song Into the West winning Best Song and Howard Shore winning Best Original Score. Dizzy Rascal won the Mercury Music Prize for the album Boy in the Corner, becoming the first rapper to win that award. The 2003 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony was held on March 10th at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. During the ceremony, the hall inducted drummer Benny Benjamin, pianist Floyd Kramer, and saxophonist Steve Douglas into the Sidemen category. Record executive Mo Austin was inducted into the non-performers category. And as far as the performers category went, the induction class was stacked with popular talent, and deservedly so, with artists AC/DC, The Righteous Brothers, The Clash, and Elvis Costello and the Attractions, all being inducted, along with this next group. The Police were one of the biggest bands to come out of the post-punk era in England. Their mixture of punk, pop, and reggae, along with thoughtful lyrics, gave them 5 multi-platinum albums and scores of hits. Gordon Sumner was a former schoolteacher who was in the jazz fusion band Last Exit when he met drummer Stuart Copeland up in Newcastle, England. The two hit it off, and when Sting moved to London, the two got together and started jamming. And soon they decided to start the band The Police. The guys got Henry Padovani, who was the guitarist for the group The Corsicans, to be their guitarist. While the guys were getting The Police going, Sting was also in a group called Strontium 90. Stuart would sit in sometimes and play drums, and it was there that the guys met guitarist Andy Summers. Impressed by his playing, they asked Andy to be The Police's second guitarist. He said yes, but he really wanted to be the only guitarist. Sting and Stuart weren't thrilled with kicking Henry out of the band, but after a couple of gigs as a quartet, Henry was unfortunately let go. The group, now a trio, released their debut album Outlandish D'Amour in 1978. The album yielded the hits Roxanne, Can't Stand Losing You, and So Lonely. The first two hits were sort of banned by the BBC, which is to say that they couldn't get played at certain times, definitely during the daytime, only late nights. No matter, though. The songs were big hits because how much street cred could you possibly get as a new band if you are being banned by the BBC? Pretty good. Roxanne actually has a very interesting backstory. In 1977, the group played a gig at the Nashville Club in Paris, France. During that night, Sting took in the neighborhood of the band's hotel when he came upon the city's red light district. While he won't say what he did there while he was there, we do know that at least it gave him an idea for a song about a guy who fell in love with a prostitute and who wanted her to change her ways. The group went and recorded Sting's song, but they weren't too thrilled with it. Their manager, Miles Copeland, thought that it was a really good song, so they kept at it. The song was released first in 1978 in England, where it went nowhere. Then the song was released in 1979 in America, where it took off. The song was then re-released in England, where it finally gained some traction, and at this point, the Police had their career off and running. Roxanne became a top 40 hit in 7 different countries. In New Zealand, it went top 10. In America, it only got as high as number 31. The song also got a slight boost from a very unlikely source. In the movie 48 Hours, star Eddie Murphy sang Roxanne towards the beginning of the movie. The song has since become a shower karaoke classic. Their next album, 1979's Regatta de Blanc, had the hits Walking on the Moon and Message in a Bottle. While the album hit number 1 in Great Britain, they were hard-pressed to find a lot of success in America. Outlandish, for instance, only got to number 25 on the Billboard Albums chart. Regatta de Blanc didn't even crack the top 40. The band finally broke through in America with the 1980 album Zenyatta Mondatta. That album had the top 10 American singles, Da Do Do Do, Da 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 Da, and Don't Stand So Close to Me. What helped the album at this point was MTV, which had just come onto the scene right during that year. The Police's music videos gave them the exposure that they needed to crack the American market. Their next album, Ghost in the Machine, furthered their ambition with the hit songs Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic and Spirits in the Material World. The Police really hit their peak with their next album, which was called Synchronicity. The lead single from that album was written by Sting. It is one of the most misunderstood songs in rock music history. Not for its words, but actually for its subject matter. The song is about a stalker, but people everywhere think to this very day that it is a love song. Sting says that people still come up to him and say that their babies were conceived to this song, to which he actually just does not like that at all. Kind of makes him feel real cringy. Sting wrote the song in 1982 while staying at James Bond authors Ian Fleming's Goldeneye estate, which is a beautiful estate, by the way, in Jamaica. Sting was going through a divorce at the time, but says he was also thinking about government and media surveillance. He only realized after the fact how creepy the song sounded, even though it sounded like a love song. Sarah McLachlan had that exact same problem with her song Possession, which is actually about the man who stalked her before he took his own life, but it sounded an awful lot like a love song. The demo for the song was recorded at Utopia Studios in London, England. It was then worked on between December 1982 to February 1983 at George Martin's Air Studios on the island of Montserrat in the Caribbean, where they were working on the Synchronicity album. Hugh Padgham was doing producing duties for this particular album. The group tried out the song in a bunch of different styles before finally settling in on the pop version that you know and love today. Andy Summers came up with the guitar riff by listening to composer Bela Bartok. They took 6 weeks to perfect the snare drums and the bass, with overdubs on the drums with the Oberheim DMX drum machine, a Tama gong drum, and also a snare drum. The piano was added to the bridge part in order to give the song that little extra added punch that the song needed. The music video also helped this song achieve its popularity. Directed by Godley and Cream, the video is a black and white video that uses a lot of shadow effects and imagery. The music video turned out to become one of the most recognizable music videos ever to be made, and also won a lot of its awards on its own. The song, Every Breath You Take, was released on May 20th, 1983 and raced up the charts, landing at number 1. It was nominated for 3 Grammy Awards. Unfortunately, it ran into a buzzsaw of an album and a ton of songs by Michael Jackson and Thriller, which ran roughshod over the various award shows that upcoming award season. The song had further life when Sean Combs heavily sampled the song for his tribute song to the Notorious B.I.G., I'll Be Missing You. Sting even graciously sang the song with Sean during a Grammy ceremony. What was Sting not so gracious about, and rightfully so? The fact that Sean Combs sampled Sting's song without Sting's permission. Combs now has to give up royalties on the song, which last figure I saw meant that Sting makes $2,000 every single day on average just from Combs' version, let alone the Police's original version, which actually gets played on the radio a whole lot more than Combs' version. For those of you trying to do a little quick math in your head on that, that means that Sting makes $730,000 a year in royalties from Combs' song. And all of that because Combs didn't ask first to use the song. So, there's a little lesson in there for you budding DJs, artists, and producers. Don't steal someone's song. Do the professional courtesy thing and at least ask first. The song has been estimated to contribute to at least a quarter of all Sting's song royalties, which is an awful lot of money, by the way. And it is one of the most played songs on radio. The Police broke up after the Synchronicity tour due to infighting. Shocking, especially during the making of that song, as Sting and Stewart really hated each other and almost had a couple fistfights. But the group, after a while, got back together for a 150 concert reunion tour in 2007 to 2008, and they are still to this day considered one of the greatest bands of the 1980s. Inducted by Gwen Stefani, Gordon Sumner, a.k.a. Sting, Stuart Copeland, and Andy Summers. The Police, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2003, and we have put all of the Police's albums onto this week's podcast music playlist. The link, as always, is in the show notes for you. The Arts Centre of Melbourne is a performing arts complex in the Melbourne Arts Precinct in Southbank, which is a suburb of Melbourne in Victoria, Australia. The center was constructed starting in 1973 and completed in 1984 when it fully opened. The center has a bunch of theaters and galleries and is noted for having not only the usual highbrow concerts and ballets from classical and jazz artists, but also for having roller skating, a circus, and a movie theater. In the complex lies an exhibit for the ARIA Hall of Fame. ARIA, or Australian Recording Industry Association, is the Australian lobbying group for their music industry. They are the ones who put on the ARIA Music Awards, which is their version of the Grammy Awards. They also induct people into their music halls of fame, simply called the ARIA Hall of Fame. The inductions started in 1988 and have been going on ever since, except for 2000 when no one was inducted for whatever reason. The number of annual inductees kind of varies, but for the last few years, only one act per year has been inducted. In 2006, the Hall of Fame inducted the group the Divinyls. The Divinyls were formed in Sydney, Australia in 1980 by lead singer Chrissy Amphlett and guitarist Mark McEntry, who had performed separately in other bands throughout Europe and Australia. The original band lineup was Amphlett on lead vocals, McEntry on guitar, Jeremy Paul on bass, and Richard Harvey on drums. While various other band members came and went with their lineup, Amphlett and McEntry were the two mainstays and also the driving forces behind the band. Legend has it that music journalist Vince Lovegrove gave the group their name after seeing the word divine in a Bible passage and throwing an S at the end of the word. Combining the word with vinyl just seemed like a natural progression from there, I guess. Chrissy's on-stage costume was usually a school uniform with fishnet stockings to give her the provocative dirty girl look. With a somewhat raspy voice and with the band's controversial sexual lyrics, she quickly became a sex symbol. She also quickly courted controversy. The band was popular in Australia in the 1980s, starting in 1981 with their song Boys in Town, along with hit songs Science Fiction and Good Die Young. The latter song title would later become ironic, as you'll soon see. The band was the opening act at the US Festival in America in 1983, and their 1985 hit Pleasure and Pain was a minor hit in America, but a major hit in Australia. Their 1990 hit, I Touch Myself, created a lot of controversy and some radio station bans because the song was about masturbation and, well, you know, America. You know how it goes. The band broke up in 1996 after Amphlett and McEntry got into an argument. Christina's problems with drugs and mental health issues definitely did not help matters any. They got back together in 2006, and in 2007 they went out on a small tour and were thinking about doing a new album together. In 2007, though, Amphlett was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and then was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2010. Chrissy Amphlett passed away from complications from breast cancer on April 21st, 2013 at the young age of 53 years old. The good truly die young. And that is your April 21st connection between Prince and Chrissy Amphlett, because Chrissy Amphlett died exactly 3 years earlier to the day that Prince passed away. The Divinyls released 5 studio albums and 6 compilation albums. Of those, 7 hit the top 20 in Australia, with 3 hitting the top 5. In America, only 1991's album Divinyls hit the top 40, topping out at number 15. The Divinyls also released 26 singles. Of those, 10 hit the top 40 in Australia, with 2 of those 10 going top 10. Their 1981 debut single, Boys in Town, which hit number 8, and 1990's I Touch Myself, which hit number 1. In America, only 3 of their songs charted. 1985's Pleasure and Pain hit number 76, I Touch Myself hit number 2, and 1991's Make Out All Right hit number 19. The band that gave Australia and America the songs Pleasure and Pain and I Touch Myself, the Divinyls, inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame in 2006, and we will put their hits onto this week's podcast playlist along with Rick James and Prince's hits. The link, as I've said before, will be in the show notes for you. There is one last thing to discuss, especially concerning this particular podcast. All of my podcasts are going to change in 2025. First off, the Music Halls of Fame podcast. There's a thought to split it up and make short separate videos for YouTube and Spotify and maybe do these segments in addition to the regular Hall of Fame podcast. We'll definitely be keeping the segment on who we think should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The other segments, like the Year in Music and different music halls of fames and museums, will probably go on YouTube videos. Some of you may also know that there's the Music History In-Depth podcast. I just released the year-ending video, which normally means the end of this particular podcast series since it was a week in the life of a year. And of course, we just did the December 25th through December 31st edition, which means you start back over again in January. However, instead of killing the podcast because the year is done, there are a bunch more stories to really go in depth on. Therefore, I have decided to do one of a few things, or maybe all of them. The first is to redo the podcast week by week with news stories for the weeks, or maybe to make it a once-a-month podcast and combine a month's worth of stories into one, or even just make it bi-weekly. Not sure which way to go yet, honestly. Still, another idea is to go really in-depth on one story per week and make videos about the story for YouTube and Spotify channels. Still, another idea is to combine all of those stories, or maybe just do a couple of them. Again, not quite sure yet. What I do know is that I'm doing a rethink on a lot of these podcasts. I am not quitting. Believe me, not by a long shot. As a matter of fact, I am looking to expand the different types of podcasts on this network and still make the workload feasible, including doing a music business news podcast, which will probably be weekly, and also rebooting my podcast that I did years ago that went over the week's music news and charts, along with other podcasts like breaking down songs and albums by their liner notes or artist careers, etc., etc., etc. Way too many ideas at this particular point, but we are not quitting. We are literally expanding. Some of these ideas will probably just be YouTube and Spotify video only, and some might only be for audio listeners, and that's it. Again, not quite sure. But business is about to pick up, and 2025 is going to be a huge year, with plans to go much more into making this a viable standalone business rather than just doing it as a side hustle or a hobby, which is what I've been doing for years, to be honest with you. The daily podcast, the Music History Today podcast, stays as it is. That one is a guarantee, although I might add a category or two to the daily podcasts. I've actually taken away one, and there's a specific reason for that, which I'll explain in a second. Also, in case you haven't noticed in certain weeks, this week being one of them, judging by my voice right now, my voice is getting worse, and I've been told by my doctor that I may need to have some vocal surgery. Not sure yet when, so I might switch to an AI voice for some podcasts in order to try and save my voice, even though I hate AI voices. Literally hate them. But maybe I'll just clone the voice instead. That might actually be better. I'm even thinking of doing a Notebook LM version of the Music History Today channel and doing a Music History Daily Podcast Notebook LM version. It's a thought anyway. Not quite sure yet. I also have this nagging idea to do a whole other channel or even more channels and sets of podcasts on other forms of music that don't get covered normally, especially on YouTube. For instance, while there's channels and networks devoted to classic rock and hip-hop, there really aren't many that cover classical or soul R&B or even country music, although there might be some that cover them specifically that I'm unaware of and that are huge, but they don't get shown to me on my recommend list. I've already dropped classical from the daily podcast because I'm planning on doing a classical music channel, and I'm going to put that category on it and do the classical music daily podcast and some other stuff on that one. That is why I have dropped classical off of the Music History Today podcast in the category section. I'm even thinking of doing that for the theater one because I'm seriously considering doing a Broadway one as well. Therefore, I think I'm going to take a crack at all these new channels, literally all of them. I'm just not quite sure when. Like I said, the workload is going to be immense, so best to stagger them as 2025 goes along. That is a ton of work after all. But by the middle of the year, probably even by springtime, they're all going to be online. And the point to all of this is that 2025 is going to be a very busy year. But announcements as to when we add channels and whatnot will be forthcoming. The Music Halls of Fame podcast is part of the Music History Today network, which can be found under Music History Today on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast from, and also on our YouTube page under Music History Today. Thank you very much for listening.